suspicious on my intelligence community. A little Beijing. That's all right. They're probably taking videos. So, thank you guys for having me. It's always an honor. I start the same way I always do when I speak to a gathering of people in law enforcement and men and women. And just I want to thank you and all the men and women that serve under your command for what they do. I think you know this. Because you're out there in the world every day, you'll notice it. But the overwhelming majority of Americans are incredibly grateful. I would say that the overwhelming majority of people are very grateful to law enforcement and what they do on a daily basis to keep us safe. Much of which, it reminds me a little bit of like playing offensive line football, where the only time people ever hear your name is when you get caught doing something wrong or allegedly holding. No one's ever really called it football, but it's allegedly. And I think this is one of those professions that's thankless in that regard. But no one goes into it for the public and for the money. They go in because they want to serve, because they want to make a difference. And so it sounds almost like a throwaway line, but it really is. We are very grateful, and I hope more people are expressing that to you every single day. And I would say even the people that have a problem with law enforcement, they still call 911 when they get in trouble. It's not something so when something bad happens, because in the end, that is the difference. What stands in the breach between us and complete chaos is law enforcement. It's the belief by people out there that if they did something wrong, you might actually get caught and get consequences. That literally is what keeps things normal. And I can tell you this because I traveled extensively in my role in the Senate, and I've gone to places where that's not the case. I've gone to places where people realize not only can they commit crimes, but they can do it with impunity. And human nature is quite a thing when that happens. You see it break out, and you see what it does to a country. It rips it apart, it destroys it. Now, that doesn't mean law enforcement alone can solve these problems. At the end of the day, when you are interacting when you interact with every single day, you did not produce it. The culture and the society that produced it. But you've seen the worst of it, and the best, but you've seen the worst. You deal with that every single day, and the impact and the toll that it has. It's truly at the front lines of our culture, but the impact and the toll that it has on men and women who happen to also be mothers and fathers and husbands and wives and neighbors and have their own lives and not robots. These are human beings who interact with us. The emotional toll of years and years of confronting not just the best in us, but the worst in us, is something that we should also recognize as we talk about these issues moving forward. Now, so I just really wanted to thank you for that. The second, I always enjoy coming to this event. I would venture to guess this may very well be the safest room in Florida at this very moment. I know it's not a safe space to be in. So safe that I almost left my iPad in the car, but I thought better of it. I said, no, you know what? These are interesting times. Let's bring the iPad. But that's it. I'm always happy to come back. So, look, what I thought I'd do today in the minutes that I have with you on, and I don't want to give you sort of this long-winded policy speech. You know the policies, you even know the problems. Like I can stand here today and tell you all the terrible things that are happening in the country and society, all the problems and challenges we have, but you either know it or heard plenty of it. Because that's really what we do. And we used to do it every 2 years in elections. Elections are basically about the people who are not in office. We'll say, vote for me because things have never been worse than they are right now, but if you elect me, I'll fix it. That's what the problem we have now is that elections are year-round. The second problem we have now, and I'm not telling you that there aren't real problems, there are. But I mean, again, look, this is sort of a train of thought that I'm just sharing with you as I speak, but like if you stayed all day on Instagram and all these other things, and all you do is watch these videos, I mean, you would think this is like the end of the world is probably tomorrow morning at some point, right? So I'm not saying that's not really happening. I'm saying that we live in an era in which that stuff is amplified. Bad things have always happened. The only thing that's happening now that didn't happen as often in the past is the shark attacks, which I don't blame on you. I don't have nothing to do about that. But honestly, amazing. People used to always say, oh, the sharks aren't going to bother you. They're not worried about you. Now, nobody says that anymore. Because like everybody now knows someone that got bit by a shark. They claim they got bit by a shark. So I actually know two people. So other than that, I'm not here to diminish our problems. They're very real. I'm trying to put it in perspective. I start out by saying this. The first thing, we've always had problems. Like, there's no era in human history that didn't have problems. And I would venture to guess that we were being honest and serious, and we would sit down for a moment, take a deep breath, and sort of compare life today to what it was like 300 years ago, anywhere in the world. Comparatively speaking, you'd still rather live today, and you'd still rather live here than anywhere else. But that doesn't mean we don't have challenges. So the way I always discuss challenges with people, first and foremost, is we first have to understand what it is we are. We are the inheritors of something very unique and special. I actually think that's not taught enough, and I don't think a lot of people appreciate that. If you study human history, you go back any time before 250 years ago, almost every single person that ever lived on Earth basically lived in a society where they had no role to play whatsoever in who their leaders were. None. You had no role to play in who your leaders were. Your rights were whatever those leaders you didn't pick told you they were. And that really, and your opportunities in life. You were only really going to basically go as far as your parents went before you. In essence, if you were born into a family of blacksmiths in the 17th century somewhere in Europe, that's what you were going to be. And that's about it. Now, were there exceptions? Yeah, there were exceptions. You know, the people that ended up, becoming, generals and invaded some country and became an emperor. But by and large, you didn't pick your leaders. You didn't really pick your destiny or your future. So, influenced by ideas that have emerged from Europe, frankly, tracking all the way back to ancient Greece about 250 years ago, the colonists of the British Empire living here, where I understand to be at least the original 13 colonies of the United States, decided that they initially didn't even want to be their own country, but they decided we want to be our own country. We want to build our country on this notion that human beings have rights that are natural, that come from your creator. Not rights that come from your leader, not rights that come from your government, rights that everybody is born with. And the job of government, and as a result our laws and law enforcement, is to protect those rights. So that you can go out and pursue your opportunities. Now they didn't do it perfectly. These men, and they were men at the time, were products of their era and products of their time. And there's a lot of hypocrisy, there's a lot of, not hypocrisy, but there's a lot of contradictions in the nation that they founded that talked about those principles. It's a nation that still enslaved human beings legally in some parts of it, even as it talked about the rights of all men, and it really meant men at the time, and landowners, and only could vote and so forth. But nonetheless, it was an extraordinary belief, and that is, again, we try to put ourselves back at that moment, at a time in which people had largely been governed by leaders they couldn't elect, to the notion that now every single person has individual rights, and then they ended up constructing a nation around that principle, imperfectly. The interesting thing is that for the last 240 some odd years, each generation of Americans who inherited that project has improved upon it. The American story is the story of perpetual improvement. Literally, every generation can say it left America better than the America they found. And that progress is truly unrivaled in modern history. And if you compare it to the rest of the world and the challenges they've had. Other nations have become democracies, other nations have become republics, other nations have constitutions. There are dictatorships on this planet that have constitutions that read almost like ours. In fact, some of them are actually more forward-leaning, but they don't live by it. But ours did. For whatever reason, we were able to maintain it, and what it allowed us to do is continue to perpetually improve the country. And the result has been nothing short of a miracle in sort of the human history. If America ended today and people wrote the story of America, they would say, that's one of the most unique places that's ever existed. It's one of the few places in the history of the world that wasn't founded as a homeland for a tribe, or a race, or an ethnicity, or even a religious group. It literally was made up of people from all over the world, and has continued to be the case. Perhaps the best example of it is athletic competitions. Every 4 years we have these, I guess it's every 2 years, because the Winter Olympics. I'm not a big Winter Olympics person. Cubans don't ice skate. The Cuban hockey team sucks. But I don't watch a lot of winter sports. I'm fine. I'm not anti-winter sports. It's just not my thing. But you can watch any of these Olympics, and when the Americans stand on the stage, you know what they look like the rest of the world. I mean, they can be from anywhere, based on ethnicity and anything else. So it's truly an amazing story. But being a free society and a society of perpetual improvement also has its challenges, and it always has. This nation has never had a time where people sat there and said, everything's perfect, if it could just stay this way forever. And every era of American history, it's been about people saying, this is not good enough, we want to become better. And we don't just do it, we do it openly. Like, we talk about our problems, we expose them. China has big problems. We'll talk about them more in a second, but China's not a perfect country. They have huge problems. They've committed demographic suicide. They didn't have enough kids, and all the kids they had are disproportionately boys. So I can just tell you what that means over time. I don't care what advances they make in science, they're going to have trouble creating new people without boys and girls that grow up to be men and women. And so they have demographic challenges. They have a debt that nobody knows what their true debt is, because they don't publish this stuff. And whatever they say it is, it's higher. So Europe,
every single day. I mean, they were trying to burn down France about 2 months ago because they wanted to change the retirement age from, I think it's like 59 to 61. So, 18-year-olds were going to burn down the country as a result of having to retire at 61. It's just whatever. I don't want to make fun of the French good people. But every place has challenges that we look at and others go through. But we have a unique set of challenges right now. And the difference between the challenges today and the challenges 50 or 60 years ago is that it's in real time. Like the distance between what's in your head and what's out in public used to be, well, I gotta sit down, I gotta type it up, I gotta get a newspaper to print it, or I gotta find some TV station to cover me. Now, the distance is as far as how quickly can these fingers type something up and post it out there for the world to see. So that's number one. So that distance is very short right now. The second problem we have is, we live in this culture that's obsessed with attention. Everybody wants to look at me, right? And so, how do you become famous, whether it's in politics or anything else? You become famous through controversy. No one gets recognized. You do not become, let's put it in where I work. You go to Washington, D.C., and you want to become like some national figure in Congress. Do you do it, A, by filing legislation, working it through the process, being responsible, finding the outcome that's balanced, understanding, okay, it's not going to all be my way because there's some guy from the other part of the country who disagrees with me, so we got to figure this out. Or B, you go online and say really crazy, abrasive, obnoxious things, then go on TV and double down. I can tell you how you get famous. It ain't A, it's B. B will get you noticed. And so today we have a bunch of political celebrities who will never pass a law, will never even influence public policy. But you know their names, because they're on TV every night saying something outrageous. And if they're on your side, you like it. If they're not on your side, you hate them. But you pay attention the next time you have them on, and you can't wait until they get caught in scandals or some embarrassing video of them. So then you can show it to everybody and say, look at this guy. But that's what we're rewarding. And that's not just true about the politics, that's true writ large. And that's what drives it is an attention. But despite all of that, we have challenges, and then they're all exacerbated and amplified by that. What are those challenges? I have a very unique set of opinions on it. And I say unique, I shouldn't say unique, but maybe different from what others might tell you. To me, it's not as simple as like, how fast is your economy growing? It has to do with the structure of the country, and the structure of our economy, and the structure of our society. So, this is sort of something I had a front seat to. In 1991, just my second year of college, and the Berlin Wall collapses, and communism collapses. Understand, I'd grown up my entire life. Like throughout the 80s, I'd grown up being told like Ronald Reagan is going to start World War III, and we're all going to die, and the world is going to end. And so the whole world, as far as I understood, it was America against the communists in Russia, the Soviet Union, and that's really what the world was about. And then the Soviet Union just vanishes, just disappears. And it wasn't just me that noticed that being in college. It wasn't like the number one thing I was focused on, okay? But I mean, I knew it was happening. Let me just put it that way. But the people that were in charge of government saw it. And it was this hubris that overtook American public policy. The idea was, okay, we won the Cold War. Communism is over. And we're the only superpower on the planet. And so now, the world will never be the same. There was actually a saying, it was called, this is the end of history. Meaning that for 5,500 years of recorded history, people belong to a place, they belong to a country, and largely the global events were defined by the conflict between different places. Generally speaking, it was the people in this place wanted to take the land from the people in that place and they went to the river. But that's really what defined human history. They were arguing that's no longer going to happen. Communism is dead, it's gone, and now everyone's going to be a democracy, everyone's going to be a free enterprise economy, and we're not going to have wars. Because, as one of the people used to famously say, it was a very common refrain, everyone's going to have McDonald's. And no two countries with McDonald's have ever gone to war. So, I know that you chuckle at that. People used to say it all the time. No, and the point they were making is that once you start doing business with people, there's no way you're going to go to war with them. That's never going to happen. The second is that we no longer have to make decisions based on what's good for the country. That country, nation, was an outdated idea. That's something from the 20th century. In the 21st century, which we're moving into, we really wouldn't be members of the nation. We would be sort of like citizens of the world, interconnected by economies. They would make stuff over there, we would buy it cheaper over here. The job I used to have would go over there, but a better job will replace that job and I'll make more money. That's the way it was all supposed to work out. And countries would no longer go to war with each other, as I said earlier, because there really is no longer any nation-state conflict. What's going to happen here is, no matter how much the politicians may want to go to war, the economy won't allow it. Because people are going to say, you can't go to war with them, they make my favorite car, or they make my favorite, cheap clothes that I buy from somewhere, or my TVs. So we can't go to war with them. I know that all sounds naive and silly, but literally that guided American public policy for 30 years. So what were the consequences of that? Well, the first consequence, it was almost arrogance to believe that, we could do anything we wanted because the world had changed. And by the way, we were America, there was nothing even close to us on the planet in terms of a competitor. So it was okay if, in the process of these changes, some things that were bad or unfair to America happened. So it really began, once you admit China into the World Trade Organization, you say, okay, well, we no longer have to make things here. Why do we need to make things in America? Let those jobs go over there, they can make it cheaper, which means it'll cost less money when we sell it, bring it back over here. We are going to be the people that invent things. So you go back to school, get a degree in technology or coding or whatever, and you'll have an even better paying job than the one that just left. And that sounds like a great idea in theory. The other notion was, let the market decide where these investments go. And I'm a free market person, I hate socialism. But let the market decide where the jobs go. Because the corporations will make more money if they get cheaper labor, the prices will be lower, and don't worry, this miraculous new economy will create jobs that are even better than the one that you used to have that now left. That was the theory. The reality is something very different. The reality of it is that what it did is it hollowed out entire communities. Now, Florida was somewhat protected because we were never really a heavy industrial state. But in parts of this country, just completely hollowed out communities. Overnight, these communities that in some cases, Flint, Michigan, used to be one of the most prosperous places in America, per capita. Hollowed it out, just sucked the life out of it. And when the jobs leave, it's not just the jobs that leave, the churches closed, the PTA stopped functioning, the Little League, all the community events that used to bind people together, those things began to collapse. As far as the jobs replacing it actually didn't happen. I mean, there are some better jobs today than the ones that used to exist here before, making a lot more money, but not in the volume. Half your country hasn't gone to college. And the other half that did owes a bunch of money for it. And the half that didn't go to college, if you don't have jobs for people that didn't go to college, that doesn't mean they don't have advanced education. Just it isn't a college degree where they had to study philosophy and take all these courses, and maybe they know how to make things or fix things. But if you don't create good paying jobs for people that have less than a college degree, what happens? What do all those people do? Well, what ends up happening is families begin to break down, communities begin to break down, and your country begins to break down. Because our country's not an economy. Our country's not a government. Our country is, the fiber of a country is communities and families. Those are the two most important institutions. More important than government, more important than anything else. Look, I'm not a sociologist, but any study of history, any study of common sense will tell you that it doesn't matter how much money your economy is making for some people, it doesn't matter how much money your government is spending, it doesn't matter how powerful your country may be internationally. If you don't have strong communities and strong families, you're going to have big, big problems. There's no law we can pass to fix that. There's no law that I can pass to fix the fact that children need to be raised. And if they're not raised and instilled with certain values, now you can raise a child in a perfect setting, okay, and they turn out not well, whatever, that happens. But I can tell you that statistically speaking, children that come from broken homes and broken communities and broken families that don't have positive role models, that are reinforcing, none of the other stuff works. No matter how much you spend in school, they're going to struggle academically. No matter what we try to do later on with this and that, it's tough to overcome. And there's a lot of reasons why these things break down. But do not underestimate the role of dignified work. Do not understand the role of dignified work has in the lives of people and their ability to get married, and their ability to start family, and then their ability to build a community. And so the economic decisions led to the social and cultural problems that we now face. And the reason why I know this to be true is it's not just us. We are not the only society in the world that deindustrialized that is facing the same challenges. They're facing it throughout Europe. If you look at nation after nation in Europe, and at the internal combustion that's occurring within their politics, it is entirely driven by this. By the fact that an entire segment of their population feels displaced. At the same time, our public policy was no longer on the basis of national interest, because this notion that nations didn't matter went out the window. And that completely ignores the fact that human nature will never change. A lot of things can change, technology can change, nations can change, the way we dress, the way we talk, the music we listen to, all these things will change. The one thing that will never change is human nature. The human social creatures that want to belong. And that is why anywhere in the world where you put people, the first thing they start doing is looking for things to join and belong to. The first thing they do. They start associations like police chiefs. Or, I'm not comparing you to them, but like you put people in prison, they join a gang, prison gang. You put people in any community and immediately they try to figure out how can we bond together. And nationhood is no different. And so nationhood matters. But the other reason why nationhood matters is that while we were making decisions in our politics in both parties, under the notion that no longer do we have to make public policy based on what's good for America, we were thinking it didn't matter anymore. We're all citizens of the world, right? Who cares if this outcome is good for America or not? If it's good for the marketplace, it's good. But other countries were not making that mistake. China didn't make that mistake. And so when we said to China, we have a deal for you. We're going to admit you to the World Trade Organization. Okay? You can steal our intellectual property. You can subsidize your companies. You can close your market to our companies, but we're going to allow your companies to do whatever they want in America. That's a heck of a deal. If I were a Chinese leader, I would take that deal every day. And they did. And they did. And so literally, over a 20-year period, almost job for job, you have the historic, unprecedented rise of the middle class in China at the direct expense of ours. The numbers are almost 1-to-1. We literally transferred an entire middle class of jobs over there, all under the notion that that's what the market dictates. I already told you guys, the free market, I believe in it 100%. But the problem is America is not a market. The free market exists as a tool. It exists to serve America, not America to serve the market. And the challenge we're having now is we're confronting the reality, what do you do when the market outcome, the pure market outcome, is not in your national interest? Now there are still some people that will say that would never happen. There's a famous, I'm paraphrasing, but a famous nominee for a position back in the Eisenhower administration said what's good for General Motors is good for America. That used to be true. It's not necessarily true anymore. Because the corporation today may have an address in America, but it's not really an American corporation. It's a multinational. And so what happens when the national interest and the market outcome are in conflict? It does happen. The market says the most efficient place to make medicine is abroad, particularly in China. So then we did. And the result is that today, 88% of the active ingredients in pharmaceuticals in America, particularly generics, and I'm not talking about exotic medicines, I'm talking about everything from Tylenol to blood pressure medication. 88% of the active ingredients are manufactured in China because the market said it's cheaper to do it there. I would ask, is it in our national interest to depend on China for 88% of our medicine? And I can fill in the blank on industry after industry after industry that we abandoned as a result of that. And so you have the vulnerability to the country, and you have this displacement in our society. And that's really an important challenge now, folks, because from that emanate everything else that's happening now. Everything else that's happening. You talk about a society where people are divided. Politics has now invaded and infused itself in virtually every institution in society. There's no place to escape it anymore. Movies, sports, and people say, well, that's just annoying. What's the big deal about it? Here's the big deal about it. In a country as diverse as ours, you have to have places where people that are different from one another, where people that have different ideas and different thoughts, different points of view come together. These Chinese spies are very creative. Probably this wasn't an armor, but I think that made it on. I'm sure the people know CPR will revive me. If it happens again, it's not a coincidence. So, in a place as diverse and as different as ours, you have to have places where people can come together and share a common experience. So, 30 years ago, politics mattered. Politics has always mattered. But you couldn't really get into an all-out brawl with people because your kids went to the same school. Yeah, your neighbors, but I'm not going to stop speaking to you because you have a bumper sticker on your car from the candidate on the other side. We've been family members our entire lives, but I'm not going to disown you because I don't like the way you voted or something you posted on Facebook. We used to have places that people could come together and share a common experience. And those spaces have been taken more and more, either A, because we've injected politics into them, or B, because we've destroyed those institutions. And so today, increasingly, what we are is a society of people hidden behind walls, isolated from one another. We only talk to and interact online with people that agree with us and tell us that we're right or further string us up. So all that emanating from the lack of community, from the lack of places where people can gather. Because how can you have community when there are no jobs to support it? So this is at the core of our challenges. And all I say is that they're not unique to us. Every advanced industrialized society is facing it. And you, the men and women that work under you, are facing it every single day. Now, I'm not saying that when you pull up to a domestic dispute call or when you interact on some other call where somebody's done something wrong, I'm asking you to analyze it. Oh, this is because we sent jobs to China 30 years ago. That connection, is pretty long. But I can tell you that when people don't have productive places to go or productive things to belong to, they will go to unproductive and destructive places and do destructive things to each other and to themselves. And we can pass laws that make it illegal. I would argue that a lot of this is already illegal, and yet it happens because we've broken the culture. And that has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed from the ground up, not from the top down. I'm not saying this because I'm in politics. It's easy to watch politics and say, oh, look at these leaders are so, the criticisms I got here today. But I will tell you that at the end of the day, our politics is really a mirror. All these people in our politics are elected. Someone voted for them, which tells you that oftentimes politics does not drive the culture, it reflects it. Politics does not drive society, it reflects it. What society is rewarding. And right now what is rewarding is divisiveness, and divide, and hatred, and anger. And it's not just counterproductive, it's distracting. It's keeping us from the core challenges of our time, which is to rebuild an economy that, yes, is grounded in the free enterprise system, but also one that takes into account the national interest. It's in defining that the national interest is not just about how the stock market did today. Because I'm telling you, the stock market can have record weeks and months, and it means nothing to people that are making $25 an hour. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. And are struggling with the cost of property insurance, buying a home if they can even afford it, and all the other costs of life that come with it, and all the other challenges that come with life today. And so having an economic policy and general policies that reflect that our national interest is not simply economics from a dollars and cents perspective. That's a part of it. You have to have an economy that produces wealth. You do. We're capitalists. We believe in the free enterprise system. But it can't only produce wealth. That economy also has to produce good paying jobs for Americans. And that's where some people say, well, that sounds like isolationism. It isn't. I don't want to isolate from the world. There are things we have to buy from the rest of the world because we don't have them and we don't make it. And there are things we'd like to sell to the rest of the world because they need it and we can make it. So I'm not talking about isolating from the world. What I am saying is this. If American government leaders are not going to put America's interests as the number one goal of every action we take in foreign or domestic policy, what government in the world is? But is the government of Chile going to make American national interests its number one priority? Is the government of Canada or any nation on earth going to make America's national interests its number one priority? So number one, we have to have leaders that once again say, no matter what we're doing, from who we ally with to who we get involved with around the world to what our tax code looks like, my number one objective is to do what's best for America. I'm not out to hurt any other country, but I got to do what's best for America. Number two is you have to define the national interest as not simply being how much is our economy going to grow from this year to the next. That's an important part of it, but it's not the only part of it. Not only how much growth is that economy going to have, but how many jobs, good paying jobs, is that economy going to produce so that Americans can fill those roles, because without those jobs, everything falls apart. Number three, I hope, is a commitment once again to our system of federalism, which is a fancy way of saying the majority of government decisions should be made as close to people as possible. Now, that is not me saying, I leave Washington alone, we don't want to solve any of our problems, go to your state officials, go to your local officials. That's me saying this, that in a country as diverse as San Francisco, in the state of Mississippi, there's no way you're going to come up with a federal policy that makes people in both of those states happy. There's just not. And we have a brilliant answer in our hands. And you know what it is for the most part? Let San Francisco and the state of California do the policies that they agree with. And then people can either A, vote those people out of office, or B, what they're doing now, which is leave the state of California if they don't like it. And let the state of Mississippi do what it's supposed to do. Now, I'm not talking about basic constitutional principles that they can violate. There has to be things, and there are things that are in the federal purview. But I am saying things like how high the taxes are, or whatever government's role might be. And that's become a problem because today, no matter what challenge we have, the first thing people say is, what law will Congress pass to fix it? And I would say in many of these things, you don't want Congress to pass a law. Because if Congress passes a law, in the place where I work in the U.S. Senate, the most powerful senator in Washington today is a senator from New York, a great state. But I don't live there, and you don't live there, and we can't vote against him if he makes the wrong decision. And that's who we empower when we decided we want Washington to solve all these problems. That's why in a nation as diverse as ours, federalism is not just a good idea, it's an essential idea. Because in the absence of it, not only will you not find good solutions, but half the country is going to feel like they're being oppressed by the other half, who somehow got their people in power. And so, making the national interest our number one priority, defining our national interest to include not just our security, not just our wealth, but the creation of good paying jobs for Americans. And returning to a system of federalism, it doesn't say federal government has no role to play, but it says that by and large the best answers are going to come as close to people as possible. Not even at the state level in many cases, but at the local level, is in my mind one of the things that gives me hope. Because I think there's a desire to do all three of those things. If we could just stop arguing about whether Barbie or Oppenheimer is the right movie to watch, or some of the other stuff we spend 50% of our time on. Now, these are major challenges. And the reason why I say it to you is because I think when, this has always been true, but the world is changing so fast, so rapidly, so disruptively, the world, meaning the economy, the structure of the world, that it is not an exaggeration to say that the decisions we're going to make now are going to impact what the next 50 to 100 years look like. But it's also not out of the ordinary to say it, because that's been true for a long time. We inherited the country you were born into, the nation you grew up in, and many of the things we still benefit from today are the result of the decisions that people made 30, 50, 100 years from now. Somebody made a decision, or a group of people made a decision, and we have enjoyed the benefits of it. And so it's fair to say that the way life is going to be in this country in 20, 50, and 100 years from now is very much going to be guided by what we do now or by what we fail to do. The bad news is that we fail to do the right things. If we continue on the road we are on right now, which is the road we place ourselves on, we don't wake up from this and start to realize what really matters and what's important, then I'm sorry to say that, unlike what I just told you at the beginning of my speech, I fear that our children will actually are on the verge, almost, of being the first Americans that inherited a country worse off than the ones their parents inherited. It'll be the first time in the nation's history that parents left their kids and grandkids worse off. And some argue that's already happened. Some argue that's already happened. When people are in their 30s before they get married, late 30s before they have children, late 30s before they buy a home, some would argue that's already happened. But I would say it was going on much deeper than that. And that's the result of the decisions that have been made and how long it's taken us to realize that we do something about it. That's the bad news. That's the road that I believe we are on, and that's the road that I think leads us to this. The road that I think we will eventually get on, and I'm hoping it will start sooner rather than later, is a road that recognizes all of these challenges and does what America always does. And that is, takes from and any time the world has changed, we've been able to benefit from the opportunities and mitigate or deal with the downside. And so whether it's tomorrow you'll open up some newspaper, it'll tell you that AI, robots are going to take over the world and kill every human being. It's probably not going to be that bad, but there are challenges associated with it. But there are also opportunities associated with it. And like in all of these other challenges I've described today. And in the end, if we do everything right, if we actually wake up and begin to focus on these things and create a governing consensus around some of this, that's the other thing that we're lacking. We used to have a governing consensus. At least during the Cold War, there was a governing consensus that, like, the Soviet Union was bad, America couldn't allow them to take over the world. There were things that governed it. If we could get to a governing consensus, then I actually think we're going to benefit from it more than any other nation on the planet. No other nation is blessed like we are. We literally have everything we need. We're protected on both sides by a vast ocean. We have fertile farmland that can feed the world. We have energy resources under our feet. We have the most creative, innovative people on the planet. Unfortunately, too many of them are spending their time in creativity making these booty videos on TikTok. If we can get them focused on like inventing stuff, you know. I'm not on TikTok. I hear they're booty videos. It's legend. Legend. So we're blessed with all these things. nation can say that. But we have to take it, and if we do that, I think we'll benefit from it more than anyone else. And I actually think that if we figure it out, that our kids and our grandkids will actually have a chance to be the freest, the safest, the most prosperous Americans that have ever lived. But if we did it all right, and we did it as soon as possible, it will still not be perfect. It will never be perfect. So long as the world is filled with and governed by imperfect creatures, there will be imperfections and things that fall short. But it'll be better. And that's what we've always done. We've made it better. And each generation we have taken a step forward and improved upon the American experiment. And all that's being asked of us now is to do what for 240 years the generations of Americans before us did. But we have to do it. And we've already waited. We waited too long to start. And so honestly, that's what's driving me to stay in public service. It literally is to try to be a part of it. Not that I'm going to do it single-handedly, but to hopefully be a part of redirecting us in this. And we'll still have our political differences. We'll still argue over silly things. All that's always existed. It'll continue to exist. But we have to spend a little bit more time on the things that actually matter. The decisions that could actually reorient the world. There's a lot of public policies that I think would help in that regard. I won't bore you with those tonight, other than to tell you that there are solutions out there and that there are opportunities. And if we do it, policing will never get easier. But I assure you that if your job was to maintain the peace and order in a community where people had a productive job to show up at 8 a.m. the next morning, and people had the hope that if they did a few things, they could actually have a better life, and they had people around them that modeled that behavior, and we had parks and organizations and civic groups that brought people that didn't know each other together, we would still have crime. We would still have criminals. But you would have a society that was a lot healthier and more wholesome than the one we have today. I'll close with this because it's the part that troubles me the most. Despite all these problems that I tell you, if you're a 21st century American, you have access to more calories at a cheaper price than any people in the history of the world. No matter how bad things have gone in your life, the chances that you have air conditioning in your home are pretty good. You probably have not one, but two televisions. You certainly must have a mobile device. By all the metrics of materialism, life in America, despite our challenges, is better than the luxuries enjoyed by the King of England 100 years ago. And yet somehow, we have people 15, 16, 17 years of age that have decided, and I say large numbers, more than there should be, who have decided that not only are things not good, things are terrible, and life's not worth living, and the lives of others is not worth anything. And so you have 16, 17, 18-year-olds that have no problem saying, I'm going to shoot up this school, or I'm going to shoot up this place. We had a shooting last night, or 2 nights ago in Gainesville. I don't even know what the motive was, but randomly some guy decided, now look, if it's a mental health issue, that's a real problem. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's an event that happened just blocks from my home. Where some guy saw on Facebook that a girl from his neighborhood was hanging out with guys from another neighborhood, and he decided to shoot up a hookah bar. Killed her, who had just graduated from college, and 2 or 3 other people that were there smoking, whatever, I guess, in a hookah pipe. At this hookah lounge, I don't know if they were smoking, but my point is that they were there. I was 19 years old. I mean, 19 years old, you decide, I'm just going to go out and commit mass murder. But that's not, it's illegal to do that. There's something wrong in your culture. There's something rotten and poisonous in your culture when a 19-year-old in the freest, most prosperous society in the history of the world believe not that their life's not worth anything, but the life of those people, including perfect strangers, is not worth anything. And I do think that some of these challenges we have contributed to it. It won't make anything perfect, but it will make it better. In the meantime, you'll continue to be on the front lines of the mistakes that have been made in the past, and reminding us of the ones that we're making now, so that hopefully we can try to make a difference. So I would say that I'm optimistic because I think Americans have always figured it out. I just think this time we have less time to figure it out than we've had in the past because the world is changing so fast. But if we do, we're going to be better off than we've ever been. And if we fail, then we'll have to explain to our kids and grandkids why they're the first Americans that got a country worse than the ones that was left to their parents and grandparents. I want no part of that latter outcome. And that's what motivates me to be in public service, and I hope that's what motivates you to continue to serve as well. The belief that we can make things better, substantially better, not perfect, better. That's what America's always done, and that's what I believe we can and should and will do again. But we can't do it without the work we do to begin with. So thank you for the chance to speak to you. God bless all of you. And please say thank you to me.